They dragged her
Don't be afraid,
shivering
we
from a
will face
frozen
this
train
together.
station,
But
calling
how
her
can you be
worthless,
sure?
just a nobody
Because
book
I am
restorer.
with you.
But the 857-year-old vampire king saw the impossible, a bloodline dead for 600 years hidden in her veins. In 8 days, she'll break an ancient curse and make them all kneel. This is how Ravel Ashcroft went from forgotten to feared. The clock above Platform 7 read 11:47 p.m. when Ravel Ashcroft realized she'd made a terrible mistake. Snow fell in thick curtains beyond the station's broken windows, the kind of snow that erased roads and buried cars and made the world disappear. She pulled her coat tighter, the gray wool one she'd bought at a thrift shop 3 years ago, the one with the frayed cuffs and missing button, and tried not to think about how cold her fingers had gotten. Even inside the station, her breath formed small clouds that hung in the air like accusations. The digital board above her head still flashed the same 2 words it had been showing for the past 3 hours. Train delayed. Ravel had stopped believing it would change to arriving. She'd stopped believing a lot of things in the past 3 hours. Her phone sat in her lap, the screen showing 8% battery and 0 signal bars. She'd already turned off everything she could to conserve power, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi location services, even the apps running in the background. It didn't matter. The cold was draining it faster than any app ever could. $43. That's what she had left in her checking account. The number had been seared into her brain since she checked it that morning, standing in line at the coffee shop near her apartment in Portland, debating whether she could afford both coffee and a muffin. She'd chosen the muffin. Now sitting in this frozen nowhere station, she wished she'd chosen neither and saved the $7. But $7 wouldn't have changed anything. $7 wouldn't get her a hotel room. $7 wouldn't buy a different life. The email had arrived 2 weeks ago, bright and promising in her inbox, like a door opening in a wall she'd been staring at for years. Thornfield Estate Archives seeks experienced rare book restorer for head archivist position. Private collection, 15th to 19th century manuscripts. Competitive salary, housing included. Vermont location, interviews, December 18th. She'd read it 17 times before she believed it was real. She'd read it another 30 times before she convinced herself to apply. Ravel Ashcroft, 24 years old, an assistant restorer at Millbrook College Library. Not head restorer, not senior anything, just assistant. The person who got coffee for the real restorers. The person who organized their tools and cleaned their workspace and was trusted with only the least valuable, least damaged books. "You're competent," her supervisor had told her once in a tone that made competent sound like an insult. "But you don't have the instinct for it. The touch, you're too careful. Too careful." As if caring about the books, about preserving them, about treating 300-year-old paper like the miracle it was, as if that was a flaw. She'd applied to Thornfield anyway. She'd sent her resume and her portfolio and 3 letters of recommendation she'd had to beg for. She'd told no one because the disappointment of not getting it would hurt less if it was private. And then they'd written back. Interview scheduled. December 18th, Wintermere Station, Vermont. Car will meet you. No address for the estate. No phone number. Just the station and the date and time. It should have been a red flag. Ravel knew that now, sitting in the cold with her dying phone and her $43 and the growing certainty that Thornfield Estate Archives didn't exist. She'd Googled it. Nothing. She'd searched historical archives, databases. Nothing. She'd even tried the Vermont Business Registry. Nothing. But she'd come anyway because what else did she have? A studio apartment she could barely afford. A job where she was invisible. A life so small it could fit in the single suitcase now sitting at her feet. The wind howled through the broken windows, carrying with it the scent of pine and something else. Something metallic and sharp that made the back of her neck prickle with unease. Ravel stood, her legs stiff from sitting, and walked to the window. Beyond the glass, beyond the snow, she could see nothing. No lights from houses, no glow from street lamps, no cars passing on distant roads. Just darkness. Complete and total darkness, like the station existed at the edge of the world. Footsteps echoed through the empty hall, slow, deliberate, the sound of expensive shoes against old tile. Ravel's heart kicked against her ribs. She turned, scanning the empty benches, the darkened corners, the shadows that seemed to move in the weak fluorescent light. "Hello," her voice came out smaller than she'd intended, swallowed by the vast space. "Is someone there?" The footsteps stopped. Silence pressed in around her, broken only by the wind and the distant creak of old wood settling. Then she saw him. He stepped out from behind one of the station's massive stone pillars, as if he'd materialized from the shadows themselves. Tall, well over 6 feet, and dressed in a way that belonged to a different century. A black coat that fell to his knees, perfectly tailored, the kind of garment that cost more than Ravel made in 6 months. Dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from marble. Sharp cheekbones, a jaw that looked capable of breaking stone, and his eyes. Even from across the station, even in the dim light, Ravel could see they weren't quite right. Too dark, too intense. The kind of eyes that didn't just look at you, but into you, peeling back layers you didn't know you had. He moved toward her with a grace that made her think of predators. Smooth, fluid, each step perfectly measured. You're still here. His voice carried across the distance between them, deep and rich, with an accent she couldn't place. European maybe, but older somehow. I wasn't certain you would be. Ravel's hand moved instinctively to her bag, to the canister of pepper spray attached to her keychain. Do I know you? Oh, Danny. No. He came closer, and she could see more details now. The silver ring on his right hand, the way his skin seemed almost too pale in the fluorescent light, the absolute stillness of him, as if he didn't need to breathe. But I know you, Ravel Ashcroft. Ice flooded her veins. How do you know my name? I know many things about you. He stopped about 10 feet away, his eyes never leaving her face. I know that your mother died when you were 16. Ovarian cancer. I know that you put yourself through college on scholarships and student loans you're still paying off. I know that you work at Millbrook College Library as an assistant restorer and that your supervisor thinks you lack instinct. Her hand closed around the pepper spray, pulling it free. Stay back. I know that you applied for a position at Thornfield Estate Archives. His lips curved into something that might have been a smile if it had reached his eyes. And I know that no such place exists. The words hit her like a physical blow. What? The job posting was false. The estate doesn't exist. The position was created for one purpose only. He took another step forward. To bring you here, to bring you to me. Ravel's mind raced, trying to make sense of it, trying to find logic in the impossible. Why, who are you, Dado? My name is Dorian Ravencrest. He said it like she should recognize it, like it meant something. And you, Ravel, are something very rare. Something I've been searching for across centuries. You're insane. She raised the pepper spray, her hand shaking but her aim steady. I'm calling the police. With what? He glanced at her phone. Your battery is at 6%. And even if it were fully charged, you have no signal. This station exists between spaces, Ravel. Between the world you know and the world you're about to discover. No one can reach you here. No one except me. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Ravel could see her breath, could feel the cold seeping through her coat like water. I don't know what kind of sick game this is. It's not a game. His voice remained calm, almost gentle. And I'm truly sorry for the deception. But there was no other way. You would never have come if I told you the truth. What truth? The pepper spray felt useless in her hand now, a child's toy against something she didn't understand. That you're not human, not entirely. That the blood running through your veins carries a power that died 600 years ago. That I've been waiting 8.5 centuries to find someone like you. His eyes seemed to glow in the dim light. And that you're coming with me. Like hell I am. Ravel backed toward the door, toward the exit, toward the snow and darknesses that suddenly seemed safer than this station with this impossible man. She made it 3 steps before he moved. One moment he was 10 feet away. The next he was in front of her, blocking her path close enough that she could smell winter on his clothes, pine and ice, and something darker. Something that made her hindbrain scream danger. Ravel raised the pepper spray and pressed down. He caught her wrist before the spray could reach his face. His hand was cold, cold enough to burn and strong enough that she couldn't pull free no matter how hard she tried. Please don't fight me. His other hand came up, reaching for her face. This will be easier if you don't fight. She opened her mouth to scream. His fingers touched her forehead, cold as winter night, and the world tilted sideways. Her vision blurred at the edges, darkening like someone was pulling a curtain across her eyes. She tried to pull away, tried to move, but her body wouldn't obey. Her muscles went slack. Her knees buckled. The last thing she heard was his voice, soft as falling snow. Sleep. Then darkness swallowed her whole. Silk. That was the first thing Ravel registered when consciousness returned. The sheets beneath her hands were silk smooth and cool, and far too expensive to belong to her. She opened her eyes slowly, her head pounding like she'd been drinking, and found herself staring at a ceiling made of stone. Not concrete or plaster, but actual stone, the kind with age spots and the faint tracery of old mortar. Heavy wooden beams crossed overhead, dark with centuries of smoke stain. This wasn't her apartment. This wasn't anywhere she'd ever been. Ravel sat up fast, then immediately regretted it as her head swam and her stomach lurched. She pressed her hands against her temples, waiting for the dizziness to pass, and took stock of her surroundings. She was in a bed, a massive four-poster bed with silk sheets and thick velvet curtains tied back with golden rope. The room around her looked like something from a museum, stone walls covered in tapestries, showing hunting scenes and medieval battles, furniture that belonged in a castle, and tall windows with actual lead glass that reflected the warm glow of candles. Candles. Not electric lights, actual candles in iron sconces, their flames casting dancing shadows across the walls. What the hell was this place? Ravel threw back the covers and swung her legs over the side of the bed. She was still wearing her clothes, jeans, sweater, boots, which was something. At least he hadn't undressed her. At least she'd woken up whole and unharmed if you didn't count the kidnapping. The kidnapping. Dorian Ravencrest, the station, the way he'd moved faster than any human should be able to move, the touch that had sent her into darkness. Her bag sat on a chair near the fireplace. Ravel grabbed it, searching frantically for her phone. Dead. Completely dead. The screen wouldn't even light up when she pressed the power button. She looked around for an outlet, then realized how stupid that was. This room didn't have outlets. This room looked like it existed before electricity was invented. A knock sounded at the door, 3 sharp raps that made Ravel jump. "Miss Ashcroft," a woman's voice warm and professional. "May I come in?" Ravel looked around for a weapon, settling on a heavy brass candlestick. She held it behind her back and called out, "The door's probably locked." "Actually, it's not." The handle turned and the door swung open to reveal a woman in her 30s with auburn hair, pulled back in a neat bun, and kind brown eyes. She wore a black dress that looked like a housekeeper's uniform, simple but well made. "I'm Marina Halford, head housekeeper. I've brought you some breakfast." She carried a silver tray laden with food, fresh bread, butter jam, cheese, fruit, and what looked like hot tea in a porcelain pot. "I'm not hungry." Ravel kept the candlestick hidden. "Where am I, Castle Ravencrest?" Marina set the tray on a small table near the window. "You're in the North Wing 3rd floor guest quarters. Lord Ravencrest thought you'd prefer a room with a view." Lord Ravencrest. The title sat wrong in Ravel's mouth, too formal, too archaic. "I want to leave." "I'm afraid that's not possible at the moment." Marina's expression remained pleasant, but something in her eyes suggested sympathy. "The roads are impassable with snow, and the nearest town is 40 miles away. Even if you could walk that far in these conditions, which I don't recommend, you'd freeze long before you made it." Ravel moved to the window and looked out. Her breath caught. The view showed a landscape from a fairy tale. The castle sat atop a mountain surrounded by dark forest, the trees heavy with snow. In the distance, more mountains rose against a gray sky, their peaks lost in clouds. No roads, no power lines, no signs of civilization at all. They could be anywhere. They could be nowhere. "How long have I been unconscious?" "About 6 hours." Marina poured tea into a delicate cup. "It's nearly 8 in the morning. Lord Ravencrest asked me to inform you that he'd like to speak with you at your convenience, but there's no rush. He understands this must all be very overwhelming." "Overwhelming." Ravel laughed, a sharp sound without humor. "Is that what we're calling kidnapping now?" Marina's professional mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something that looked like genuine regret. "I know this isn't ideal, but Lord Ravencrest doesn't mean you any harm. He brought you here because I'm something rare, something he's been searching for, blah, blah, blah." Ravel turned from the window. "I heard the speech. What I want to know is what happens if I refuse to cooperate with whatever insane plan he has." "Nothing happens." Marina met her eyes steadily. "You're not a prisoner, Miss Ashcroft. The door isn't locked. You're free to move about the castle. Lord Ravencrest simply hopes you'll hear him out before making any decisions. And if I decide to walk out that door and down that mountain, then I'll provide you with warmer clothes and supplies." Marina's voice was gentle but firm. "But I hope you won't. Not because of Lord Ravencrest's wishes, but because I think you deserve to know why you're really here. Why the job posting appeared exactly when it did. Why you specifically out of all the people in the world." Ravel wanted to argue, wanted to grab her bag and storm out and damn the consequences. But something in Marina's tone stopped her. A sincerity that felt real in a way nothing else had since she'd woken up. "Fine." She set the candlestick down on the table. "I'll hear him out, but I'm keeping this door unlocked And if anyone tries to stop me from leaving, I'm going to make a lot of noise about it. Fair enough. Marina smiled, and it transformed her face from pleasant to genuinely warm. Eat something, please. The bread is fresh from the kitchen, and the tea is excellent. When you're ready, I'll show you to Lord Ravencrest's study. She left, closing the door softly behind her. Ravel stood in the middle of the room, her heart still racing, her mind spinning with too many questions. She should run. She should find a way out of this castle and get as far away as possible from Dorian Ravencrest and his cryptic warnings. But Marina was right about one thing. Ravel needed to know why. Why her? Why now? Why a man who moved like something other than human had created an elaborate fake job posting just to lure her to a train station in the middle of nowhere. She sat down at the table and poured herself tea. The bread was still warm, and despite everything, despite the fear and anger and confusion, her stomach rumbled. She hadn't eaten since the muffin yesterday morning. The food was good, better than good. The kind of quality that reminded Ravel just how small her life had been, how narrow her world. She'd been eating ramen and peanut butter sandwiches for years, telling herself it was fine, it was just temporary. Looking out the window at the impossible castle and the snow-covered mountains, Ravel wondered if anything had ever really been temporary. Or if this moment sitting in a medieval bedroom eating fresh bread while trying not to think about the man who'd stolen her from a train station, if this moment was what her whole life had been leading toward. She finished eating and stood squaring her shoulders. Whatever came next, she'd face it on her own terms. She'd listen to what Dorian Ravencrest had to say, and then she'd decide whether to believe him or find a way to escape. But first she needed to see exactly what kind of cage she'd woken up in. Castle Ravencrest was larger than any building Ravel had ever been inside. Marina led her through corridors that seemed to stretch forever past windows that looked out over courtyards covered in snow, down staircases worn smooth by centuries of footsteps. The walls were stone, dressed with tapestries and paintings of stern-faced people in clothing from every era of the past 1,000 years. Suits of armor stood in alcoves, swords crossed above doorways. Everything spoke of age and wealth, and a history that made Ravel's 24 years feel like nothing. They passed other people's servants, mostly all dressed in black and gray uniforms. Some nodded to Marina. Others watched Ravel with open curiosity, their eyes following her progress down the hall. "How many people live here?" Ravel asked. "It varies." Marina turned down another corridor, this one lined with portraits of men who all shared the same sharp features, the same intense eyes. Castle staff numbers about 30. The family and their associates, that number fluctuates. Right now, I'd say perhaps 50 in residence. And they all work for Dorian Ravencrest. Lord Ravencrest, Marina corrected gently. And yes, in one way or another. The castle has been in the Ravencrest family for over 800 years. 800 years, the same number Dorian had used at the station. 8.5 centuries, he'd said, like he'd been alive for all of them. Impossible. But then again, everything about this place felt impossible. They stopped in front of a pair of carved wooden doors, each one tall enough for a giant to walk through comfortably. Marina knocked once and pushed them open without waiting for a response. The room beyond took Ravel's breath away. It was a library. No library was too small a word. This was a cathedral of books. The walls rose 3 stories high, every inch of them covered in shelves packed with leather-bound volumes. A gallery ran around the second and third levels, accessible by a spiral staircase of wrought iron. Tall windows let in gray morning light that illuminated thousands upon thousands of books, more books than Ravel had seen outside of major research libraries. And in the center of it all, sitting behind a massive oak desk covered in open manuscripts and old maps, was Dorian Ravencrest. He looked up as they entered, and Ravel felt the same jolt of recognition she'd felt at the station. Those eyes, too dark, too knowing, looking at her like he could read every thought in her head. Ravel, he stood, and she noticed he'd changed clothes, no longer the long coat, but a simple black shirt and dark pants that somehow made him look even more otherworldly. "Thank you for agreeing to see me." "I didn't really have a choice," her voice came out, steadier than she felt. "You always have a choice." He gestured to a chair in front of his desk. "Please, sit." Marina slipped out, closing the doors behind her with a soft click. Ravel remained standing. "I'd rather not. This won't take long." "I think it might take longer than you imagine." Dorian came around the desk, leaning against it casually. "There's a great deal you need to understand." "Then start with the truth. Who are you really? And don't give me some Lord of the Manor nonsense. People don't move the way you moved at that station. They don't put others to sleep by touching them. They don't..." She gestured at the library, the castle, everything. This isn't normal. No, it's not. He watched her carefully like he was deciding how much to reveal. I am Dorian Ravencrest, though that's not the name I was born with. I am 857 years old, give or take a decade. And I am what your modern world calls a vampire, though that word carries connotations that aren't entirely accurate. Ravel stared at him. Then she laughed, the sound harsh and disbelieving. Vampires, right, and I suppose you want to drink my blood. I don't want to do anything to you without your consent. His expression remained serious. But yes, I am what I am. I've lived for over 8 centuries. I've watched empires rise and fall. I've seen the world change in ways you couldn't imagine. And for all those centuries, I've been searching for someone like you. Someone like me, Ravel crossed her arms. And what exactly am I supposed to be? A descendant of a bloodline we thought extinct. He moved to one of the bookshelves and pulled out a leather-bound volume, ancient and handled with obvious care. The seers, people born with the ability to touch an object and see its history, to read the memories woven into metal and stone and wood. 600 years ago, they were hunted to extinction by those who feared their power. The last known seer died in 1425. He opened the book to a page marked with a ribbon and held it out to her. Ravel took it, her hands shaking slightly. The page showed a portrait painted in the style of medieval manuscripts. A young woman with dark hair and pale skin wearing a simple dress. And there on her left shoulder, visible where the dress had slipped, a birthmark. The same port wine stain that Ravel had been self-conscious about her entire life. The woman in the painting could have been her twin. Her name was Serafina, Dorian said softly. She was the last of her line, or so we believed. Ravel's hands trembled as she stared at the portrait. The resemblance was impossible to deny. Same eyes, same face, same mark. This doesn't prove anything, but her voice lacked conviction. Touch the book. What? Touch the leather binding. Really touch it. Focus on it. He moved closer, his voice low and intense. If I'm wrong, nothing will happen. But if I'm right, against her better judgment, against every screaming instinct that told her to run, Ravel placed her palm flat against the book's cover. The world exploded. Images flooded her mind too fast to process, hands binding the book. A monk's cell lit by candlelight, rain falling on a roof somewhere in Germany. A fire that nearly destroyed the volume in 1673. A woman crying as she read it by moonlight, and under it all, a steady pulse of age and knowledge and power. Ravel yanked her hand back, gasping. The book fell to the floor. What was that? She backed away, her heart hammering. What did you do to me? I did nothing. Dorian picked up the book carefully, reverently. That was you, your gift, the seer ability awakening for the first time. You just read 500 years of history in 5 seconds. That's impossible. So are vampires. He set the book on his desk. And yet here I am, here you are. The world is far stranger than you've been taught to believe, Ravel. She wanted to deny it, wanted to laugh it off as a trick, a hallucination, anything but real. But she could still feel the echo of those images in her mind, the weight of all that history pressing against her consciousness. Why? The word came out broken. Why me? Why now? Because 8 days from now, during the blood moon, there's a ritual that can break an ancient curse. A curse that has bound my people for nearly a millennium. And that ritual requires a seer of pure bloodline to perform it. He met her eyes. I've been searching for someone like you for over 800 years. And now that I've found you, I need your help. And if I refuse, then the curse remains unbroken. My people continue to suffer. And you, he paused. You're free to go. I won't stop you. But I'm asking, begging, if necessary, for you to at least stay long enough to understand what's at stake. Ravel looked around the library at the thousands of books that could tell her their stories if she touched them. At the impossible man standing in front of her claiming to be 857 years old. At her own hands, which had just done something that defied everything she thought she knew about the world. How long do I have to decide? The blood moon is in 8 days. The ritual must be performed then, or we wait another century. His expression was grave. But I won't rush you. Take whatever time you need. Ask me anything. I'll answer truthfully. Then answer this. Ravel lifted her chin. What happens to me if I do this ritual? What's the cost? Dorian's face darkened. That's complicated. Uncomplicated. He was quiet for a long moment. Then the prophecy speaks of a willing sacrifice, of binding your life to mine to break the curse. What that means exactly, I don't fully know. The previous candidate refused to attempt it, and he stopped. She what? She died anyway. The curse took her when she tried to leave. His voice was barely above a whisper. I won't let that happen to you. If you choose to help, I'll find a way to protect you. If you choose to leave, I'll find a way to send you home safely. But I need you to know the truth before you decide. Ravel's mind reeled. A curse, a ritual, a willing sacrifice. And underneath it all, the impossible fact that she could touch objects and see their history, that she carried a bloodline thought dead for 6 centuries. I need time. Of course, and I need to see proof, real proof, not just books and portraits. If you want me to believe in vampires and curses and ancient prophecies, I need to see it with my own eyes. Dorian nodded slowly. Then I'll show you. Tonight at the evening court, you'll meet my people. You'll see exactly what we are. He hesitated. But I should warn you, not everyone will be pleased by your presence. Some will see you as a threat, others as an opportunity. You'll need to be careful. I'm always careful. No, Oz. His lips curved into a small smile. You're cautious. There's a difference. Caution keeps you safe. Careful keeps you small. And you, Ravel Ashcroft, are meant for something far bigger than the life you've been living. The words hit harder than they should have. Because part of her, the part that had applied for that fake job, the part that had gotten on a train to nowhere with $43 and a suitcase full of hope, that part knew he was right. She'd been living small, living safe, living invisible. Maybe it was time to be seen. Tonight, then, she moved toward the door. I'll meet your people, and then I'll decide whether to believe any of this. Ravel, she stopped her hand on the door handle. Thank you for listening, for staying, for giving me a chance, be okay. His voice carried something she hadn't heard before, vulnerability. Real, raw vulnerability. I know I've taken your choice away by bringing you here, but I swear to you everything from this moment forward is your decision. Your choice. I won't force you into anything. Ravel looked back at him, at this impossible man who claimed to be a vampire who'd searched for 800 years for someone like her. His eyes held no deception that she could see, only hope and desperation and something that might have been loneliness. We'll see, she said, and walked out. The evening court began at 8 o'clock. Marina had brought Ravel a dress, simple but elegant dark blue velvet with long sleeves and a modest neckline. It fit perfectly, which should have been creepy, but instead felt oddly thoughtful. The castle was cold, and the velvet was warm. You'll want to make a good impression, Marina had said while helping arrange Ravel's hair. First impressions matter in court. I'm not trying to impress anyone. Perhaps not, but they'll be judging you regardless. Marina's hands were gentle as she pinned dark curls back from Ravel's face. Lord Ravencrest's people can be particular. Just remember that you're under his protection. No one will harm you. The way she said it made Ravel think that without Dorian's protection, harm would be very much on the table. Now she stood outside the great hall, listening to the sound of voices and music filtering through the heavy wooden doors. Marina had left her here, saying she'd announce Ravel when the time was right, whatever that meant. The door swung open. The hall beyond was enormous, lit by hundreds of candles and chandeliers that hung from a ceiling, lost in shadow. Long tables filled with people, 50, maybe more. They're all dressed in clothing that ranged from modern to medieval. At the far end of the hall, on a raised dais, sat Dorian in a throne of black wood carved with the symbols Ravel didn't recognize. Every conversation stopped. Every head turned. 50 pairs of eyes fixed on Ravel, and she felt suddenly acutely aware of how out of place she was. A nobody book restorer from Portland, standing in a hall full of people who looked like they'd stepped out of history itself. Lady Ravel Ashcroft, Marina announced from somewhere behind her, guest of Lord Ravencrest under his protection and hospitality. Ravel forced herself to walk forward, her chin up, her steps measured. She would not show fear. She would not give them the satisfaction. Whispers followed her progress down the hall. She caught fragments. Human. Surely not. After all this time, a woman's voice, sharp and cold, cut through the murmurs. How quaint. Ravel turned toward the voice and found herself looking at someone who could only be described as perfect. Silver hair that fell in waves past her shoulders. Skin like porcelain. Eyes the color of ice. She sat near the dais, her posture radiating authority and disdain in equal measure. A human. The woman smiled, showing teeth that seemed just slightly too white, too sharp. In Castle Ravencrest, I didn't think you'd sunk quite this low, Dorian. Lady Seraphine, Dorian's voice carried warning. Ravel is my guest. You will treat her with respect. Of course. Seraphine's smile didn't waver. I'm merely surprised. After 8 centuries of searching for a seer, I expected someone more impressive. Laughter rippled through the hall. Not friendly laughter, the kind that made you feel small. Ravel's hands clenched at her sides. I'm sorry I don't meet your expectations. I left my impressive outfit in my other castle. The laughter stopped. Several people gasped. Seraphine's expression went cold. Clever tongue. I wonder if it will still be so sharp when you realize what you've walked into. Perhaps we should allow Lady Ravel to settle in before testing her mettle. Another woman spoke, this one with auburn hair pulled back and kind brown eyes. Not Marina, someone else, someone who sat at Seraphine's table but didn't share her cruelty. She's only just arrived. Testing her mettle is exactly what we should be doing. A man's voice deep and scarred with violence. He stood from a table near the center of the hall, and Ravel's breath caught. He was massive. Not just tall, but broad, with shoulders that looked capable of breaking doors. His face bore the marks of old violent scars that crossed his left cheek and disappeared into his collar. And his eyes, when they fixed on Ravel, held nothing but contempt. Lord Theron Kane of the Eastern Houses, Dorian said quietly. Leave her be. I'm merely curious. Theron moved closer, circling Ravel like she was prey. This is the seer. This small, fragile thing, she looks like she'd break in a strong wind. Looks can be deceiving. Ravel met his eyes, refusing to back down. Can they? He leaned in close enough that she could smell blood on his breath. How long do you think you'll last here, little human, 3 days for? I'll be generous and give you a week before the nightmares drive you mad. That's what happened to the last one. There was no last one, Dorian said sharply. Ravel is the first in 600 years. The first in 600 years. Theron's smile was cruel. How special? Tell me, does she know what the ritual requires? What happens to the seer who attempts to break the curse? Ravel's stomach dropped. What happens? Death, Theron said simply. Painful, agonizing death. The prophecy is quite clear on that point. Willing sacrifice means exactly what you think it means. The hall erupted into murmurs. Ravel looked at Dorian, searching his face for denial, for any sign that Theron was lying. She found only guilt. You didn't tell her. Theron laughed, the sound like breaking glass. You brought her here, gave her pretty words about choice and protection, and didn't tell her she'd die if she helps you. How noble. Get out! Dorian's voice was thunder. Power rolled off him in waves that made the candles flicker. Take your poisonous words and leave my hall. Gladly. Theron inclined his head in mock respect. But I'll be watching Lord Ravencrest, watching to see how long your precious seer survives. I give her 3 days. He strode out, several others following him. The silence he left behind was deafening. Ravel stood frozen, her mind spinning. Death. The ritual meant death. And Dorian had known. He'd known and hadn't told her, had let her think she had a choice when really the only choice was whether to die helping him or die trying to leave. Ravel, Dorian started. Don't. She held up a hand. Just don't. She turned and walked out of the hall, her composure cracking with every step. Behind her, she heard Dorian calling her name, heard footsteps following. She didn't care. She needed air, needed space, needed to think without 50 pairs of eyes watching her fall apart. The castle corridors blurred around her. She took turns at random, not caring where she ended up, just needing to move, to run, to escape the terrible truth that had just shattered her world. She ended up in another library. Not the grand one where Dorian had shown her the portrait, but a smaller room filled with older books, darker books, books that looked like they'd been forgotten for centuries. And there in the back corner, behind a chain that stretched across a section of shelves, she saw it. A plaque. Small. Tarnished with age. Forbidden. By royal decree. Ravel looked behind her. The corridor was empty. Wherever Dorian and his people were, they weren't here. She ducked under the chain. The books in this section were different. Older. Bound in leather that felt wrong under her fingers, like it had never been tanned properly. Or like it had been tanned from something other than cow. One volume stood out from the rest, larger, heavier, bound in black leather with silver clasps shaped like ravens. Ravel pulled it from the shelf. It fell open in her hands as if it had been waiting for her, the pages turning to a specific spot near the middle. A portrait stared up at her. The same woman from before Seraphina. But this time she wasn't alone. Next to her stood a man who looked like Dorian might have looked 800 years ago. Younger, less haunted. And between them, written in script that seemed to shimmer in the candlelight, prophecy of the Blood Crown. In the 8th century of the Vampire King's reign, When winter holds the world in chains, a mortal mirror of the last seer shall appear. Born of loss, her blood shall herald the world's rebirth. The cursed king shall claim her soul, and she willing shall sacrifice all to break the bonds that bind the night. Her mortal heart must choose break the chains through death or rule the darkness for eternity. Ravel's hands shook as she read it again and again. Death or darkness. Those were her options. Die in the ritual or become something like them. Something eternal. Something cursed. Now you know. She spun around. Dorian stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. You were never going to tell me, were you? Her voice broke. You were going to let me think I had a choice, and you do have a choice. He moved closer slowly, like approaching a wounded animal. The prophecy speaks of two paths. Yes, one ends in death, but the other makes me like you, a vampire. Eternal. Cursed. She slammed the book shut. That's not a choice, that's torture by another name. I know. His voice was barely a whisper. I know it's asking the impossible. But Revel, please understand, the curse isn't just about immortality. It's taken everything from us. Our humanity, our ability to feel warmth, joy, real connection. For 800 years, I've watched my people suffer trapped between life and death, never truly experiencing either. And you think sacrificing me will fix that? I think you're the only hope we have. He reached for her, then stopped, his hand falling. But I won't force you. I swear it. If you want to leave it, I'll find a way. Even if it costs me everything. Ravel looked down at the prophecy book, at the portrait of the woman who looked like her. The last seer. The one who died refusing to help. Why didn't she do it, Serafina? Why did she refuse? Because she was afraid. Dorian's voice was raw. And I didn't blame her then, and I won't blame you now if you make the same choice. But your people will. My people will do as I command. He stepped closer. You've seen Theron, seen Seraphine. There are those who doubt you, who think you're weak. But there are also those who are desperate enough to hope, who've suffered for so long that they'd take any chance no matter how slim. And you... She met his eyes. What do you think? Dorian was quiet for a long moment. Then I think you're braver than you know, stronger than you believe. And I think that if anyone can find a third path, something beyond death or darkness, it's you. A third path, Ravel laughed bitterly. Is that even possible? I don't know, but I've had 800 years to study this prophecy, and there are parts of it that still don't make sense. Gaps, ambiguities. Her mortal heart must choose. What if that doesn't mean what we think it means? What if there's another way to interpret it? You're grasping at straws. I'm hoping. He reached for the book, his fingers brushing hers as he took it. That's all I have left. Hope that you're the one who can break this curse. Hope that I haven't doomed you by bringing you here. Hope that somewhere in all this darkness, there's still light. Ravel looked at him, really looked. Past the impossible age, past the supernatural power, past the aristocratic bearing. And she saw what she'd seen at the train station, what she'd been trying not to see. Loneliness, bone-deep, soul-crushing loneliness. The kind that came from living too long, seeing too much, losing everyone you ever cared about. 8 days, she said finally. What? You said the blood moon is in 8 days. That means I have 8 days to figure out if there's another way. 8 days to study this prophecy, to understand what it really means. 8 days to decide. Hope flickered in his eyes. You're staying. I'm staying for 8 days. She took the book back. And in that time, you're going to give me access to everything, every book in this castle, every record, every piece of history you have about seers and curses and prophecies. If I'm going to make it a choice, it's going to be an informed one. Anything you need, anything at all. And one more thing. Ravel met his eyes. No more lies, no more half-truths. If I'm going to trust you even a little, I need complete honesty. You have it. He placed his hand over his heart. On my honor, on my name, on everything I am, I will tell you the truth. Ravel nodded slowly. 8 days. 8 days to unravel an 800-year-old curse. 8 days to decide between death and darkness, or to find that third path Dorian spoke of, if it even existed. She looked down at the prophecy book, at the portrait of Serafina, and made a silent promise to the woman who'd come before her. I won't make your mistake. I won't die in fear. If I'm going down fighting. And if I'm going to save these people, I'm going to do it my way, on my terms. Show me everything, she said. And Dorian smiled. The library became Ravel's world. For the next 2 days, she barely left it. Marina brought meals on silver trays, food that Ravel ate without tasting, her eyes never leaving the ancient text spread across the massive oak table. Sleep came in fragments, stolen hours where she'd collapse on the velvet couch near the fireplace, the prophecy book clutched to her chest like armor. Dorian gave her space. He'd appear occasionally, setting down a new volume without speaking or stoking the fire when it burned low. Sometimes Ravel would look up from her reading to find him watching her from across the room, his expression unreadable. Then he'd nod once and leave silent as shadow. She was grateful for the silence. Her mind needed room to work, to process the impossible things she was learning. The seers hadn't just been able to read object memories. They'd been prophets' advisors to kings, the bridges between the mortal world and something older. The book spoke of seers who could touch a sword and see not just its past but its future, the battles it would fight, the blood it would spill. Seers who could lay hands on a dying person and know exactly how to save them, their fingers reading the body's history like a physician reads symptoms. The power had terrified people, and fear, as always, had led to slaughter. By the third morning, Ravel's eyes burned from candlelight and her head pounded from too much information absorbed too fast. But she'd found something. A pattern in the prophecies, a thread that connected them all. Choice. The seer's power had always been about choice, seeing all possible paths and choosing which one to walk. She was staring at a particularly dense passage in Old French when the library door opened. Not Dorian this time, someone else. Ravel looked up to find a woman she hadn't seen before standing in the doorway. Auburn hair pulled back in an elegant knot, warm brown eyes, a dress of deep green that looked expensive but not ostentatious. "I'm sorry to intrude." The woman's voice was cultured, gentle. "I'm Vivian Frost. We weren't properly introduced at court." Ravel set down her book carefully. She remembered the name from Dorian's warning. "Not everyone will be pleased by your presence." "Lady Vivian." "Just Vivian, please." She moved closer, her steps light. "I wanted to apologize for the other night. Theron and Seraphine can be difficult, but not all of us share their hostility." "That's refreshing to hear." Vivian smiled, and it transformed her face from beautiful to radiant. "May I?" She gestured to the chair across from Ravel. "It's not my library." "No, but you've claimed it rather thoroughly these past days." Vivian sat, her posture perfect. "Marina says you've barely eaten or slept. That's admirable dedication, but not sustainable. You'll make yourself ill." "I have 8 days to unravel an 800-year-old curse. Sleep feels like a luxury I can't afford." "Perhaps, but you can't help anyone if you collapse from exhaustion." Vivian leaned forward slightly. "I know what it's like, to be the outsider, to walk into a room full of vampires and feel like prey." Ravel studied her. "You were human once." 300 years ago, I was turned during the reign of Louis XIV, a political arrangement, really. My family wanted immortality. The vampire lord wanted connections to the French court. I was the price both sides paid." Her smile turned sad. "So I understand what you're feeling. The fear, the isolation, the sense that you're trapped in something beyond your control." Something in Ravel's chest loosened. For the first time since arriving at Castle Ravencrest, someone was speaking to her like an equal, not a curiosity or a threat. "Thank you," Ravel said quietly. "That actually helps." "I'm glad." Vivian's eyes were kind. "If you need anything, a break from the books, someone to talk to, a friend in this rather overwhelming place, please don't hesitate. We outsiders need to support each other." After she left, Ravel sat for a long moment staring at the closed door. Maybe not everyone here was an enemy. Maybe there were allies to be found if she was brave enough to trust. She turned back to her books, feeling slightly less alone. The breakthrough came on the morning of day 4. Ravel had been studying a treaty between vampire houses from 1547, trying to understand the political structure Dorian governed, when her fingers brushed against the notation in the margin. Handwritten, old ink barely visible. The moment her skin made contact, the world shifted. Images flooded her mind, not vague impressions this time, but crystal clear visions. A man sitting at this very table, quill in hand, writing the treaty by candlelight, his face tight with stress. Outside the window, war. Vampires fighting vampires, the night lit by supernatural fire. The man, a lord she understood somehow, signing the treaty, not because he wanted peace, but because his house was losing. Ravel gasped and pulled her hand back. The vision vanished, leaving her breathless and shaking. But this time she understood what had happened. The seer ability wasn't just passive reading, it was active sight. She could choose what to focus on, could follow specific threads of history if she concentrated. She pressed her palm flat against the treaty again. This time she focused, not on the writer but on the treaty itself. What happened after it was signed? The visions came faster. The treaty held for 20 years. Then a vampire named Marcus Vale broke it, assassinating the Lord's heir during a peace summit. War erupted again. More death, more suffering. The treaty became meaningless, just another broken promise. Ravel released the document, her heart racing. She could do this. She could actually control it. She spent the next hour testing her ability on everything she could reach. A candlestick showed her the servant who'd polished it that morning, the workshop where it had been forged in 1689, the fire that had nearly melted it in 1702. A book revealed not just its binding, but every person who'd ever read it, every hand that had turned its pages. By noon, she'd mapped a century of castle history just by touching objects in the library. This was power, real power. And maybe, just maybe, it was the key to understanding the prophecy in a way no one had before. Dorian found her that evening surrounded by artifacts she'd pulled from various corners of the library, each one touched and cataloged. "You've been busy." He surveyed the organized chaos with something like awe. "I can control it now." The visions. Ravel held up an old dagger. "This belonged to your grandfather 7 generations back. He used it to sign a peace treaty with the Eastern Houses in 1423. The treaty was broken 3 months later when Lord Candy Theron's ancestor ambushed his convoy." Dorian stared at her. "How could you possibly know that?" "I saw it." She set the dagger down carefully. "I can see everything these objects remember. And I'm getting better at choosing what to look for." "That's—" He moved closer, his expression shifting from surprise to something deeper. "Ravel, that's extraordinary. Most seers took years to develop that level of control. You've done it in 4 days." "I'm a quick learner." She tried to sound casual, but pride warmed her chest. When was the last time someone had called her extraordinary? When had anyone seen her as more than competent at best? "You're more than that." Dorian's voice was soft. "You're remarkable, and I need your help with something." He led her to his study where a man waited. Older, at least in appearance, with gray hair and a face lined with stress. Not a vampire, Ravel realized. Human. A servant, perhaps, or— "This is Henrik," Dorian said. "He represents the northern clans. They've been in a territorial dispute with the eastern houses for 2 decades. I've been trying to resolve it, but every treaty we draft Theron finds a loophole to exploit." Henrik bowed stiffly. "My people are suffering, Lady Ashcroft. The eastern houses raid our borders, steal our resources. Lord Ravencrest tries to help, but Lord Kane is clever. He uses old laws against us." "Old laws," Ravelli looked at Dorian. "The vampire code is complex, ancient. There are treaties dating back centuries that contradict each other, and Theron knows them all. Every time I think I've found a solution, he cites some obscure clause from 1304 that makes my ruling invalid. Show me the treaties." They spread dozens of documents across the desk. Parchment and paper and vellum, some so old they crumbled at the edges. Ravel touched each one, letting the visions come. She saw centuries of vampire politics, the rise and fall of houses, the careful dance of power and blood. And there, buried in a treaty from 1289, she found it. A clause that superseded all the others. A founding law that even Theron couldn't argue against. "Here," she pointed to the faded text. "This treaty was signed by the First Council before the Eastern Houses even existed. It establishes territorial rights based on bloodline, not conquest. Henrik's people have an unbroken line going back to the original signatories. That gives them precedence over any claim Theron might make." Dorian read the clause, his eyes widening. "How did I miss this?" "Because it's written in Old Norman French, and the key word precedence uses an archaic form that looks like preference in modern translation. Everyone's been reading it wrong for 700 years. Ravel allowed herself a small smile. "I saw the man who wrote it. I know what he meant." Henrik's face broke into the first genuine smile she'd seen on anyone in this castle. "This will hold. Lord Ravencrest can enforce it." "I can." Dorian was already pulling out fresh parchment. "I'll issue the ruling tonight. Theron will challenge it, but he won't be able to break it." After Henrik left, nearly dancing with relief, Dorian turned to Ravel. The look on his face made her breath catch. "You just solved a problem I've been wrestling with for 20 years. I just read some old documents." "No." He moved closer, and she could see emotion swimming in those dark eyes. "You saw what no one else could see. You found truth where others found only confusion. That's not just reading Revel. That's wisdom. The word landed like a physical touch. Wisdom. Not competent, not careful, wise. I should get back to my research. She needed distance, needed to think. The way he was looking at her made her feel things she couldn't afford to feel for a vampire king who needed her to tear or become a monster. Wait. His hand caught her wrist, gentle, not restraining. Thank you, not just for the treaty, for staying, for trying. You could have run and I would have deserved it. But you're here and you're fighting and I... He stopped seeming to struggle for words. I haven't had anyone fight alongside me in a very long time. Their eyes met, held. Ravel pulled away first. 8 days, remember, I'm here for 8 days. After that, we'll see. But as she walked back to the library, she could still feel the warmth of his hand on her wrist. Could still see the vulnerability in his eyes when he'd said thank you. She was starting to care about him, about his people, about this impossible situation. And that terrified her more than any curse. On the evening of day 5, Ravel couldn't take the library anymore. Her eyes ached, her back hurt, and the words in the ancient texts had started blurring together. She needed air, space, something other than stone walls and candlelight. She found her way to the castle's eastern tower, climbing the spiral stairs until she emerged onto a battlement overlooking the mountains. Snow still covered everything pristine and endless under a sky full of stars. The cold bit through her borrowed cloak, but Ravel didn't care. After 5 days of stuffy indoor air, the wind felt like freedom. Couldn't sleep either. She turned to find Vivian leaning against the tower wall, wrapped in a fur cloak, a cup of something steaming in her hands. Too much reading, Ravel admitted. My brain feels like it's going to explode. I brought tea. Vivian held up a second cup that had been sitting on the stone. Marina mentioned you like chamomile. It's probably cold by now, but it's perfect. Ravel took the cup gratefully. The tea was lukewarm, but it tasted like comfort. They stood in companionable silence for a while, looking out at the mountains. Finally, Vivian spoke. Can I ask you something personal? You can ask, I might not answer. Fair enough. Vivian's smile was rueful. Are you going to do it, the ritual? Ravel took a long sip of tea, buying time. I don't know. I'm still trying to understand what it really means. It means choosing between death and immortality, between ending your life at 24 or living forever as one of us. Vivian's voice was soft. I won't lie to you, Ravel. Immortality isn't the gift people think it is. You watch everyone you love die. You see the world change and realize you don't change with it. You become frozen, a relic of whatever time you were turned in. You sound like you regret it. Sometimes I do. Vivian stared out at the darkness. But sometimes I'm grateful. I've seen wonders that no human will ever see. I've loved and lost and loved again. I've become something more than I was. She turned to Ravel. If you choose immortality, it won't be easy. But it won't be the end either, just different. And if I choose death, then you'll be remembered as the bravest person I've ever met. Vivian's eyes were serious. Either way, the choice is yours. Don't let Dorian or the prophecy or anyone else tell you what to do. After Vivian left, Ravel stood alone on the battlement, thinking about choices and courage, and the woman who just offered her tea and kindness without asking for anything in return. Maybe she'd been wrong. Maybe not everyone in this castle was playing games. Maybe some of them were just trying to survive, same as her. The conspiracy revealed itself on day 6. Ravel had gone to the library late past midnight, unable to sleep. She grabbed a candle and headed for the restricted section, thinking she might find something new in the darker texts. Voices stopped her halfway there, low, secretive, coming from somewhere deeper in the library. Ravel extinguished her candle and moved silently toward the sound, her heart hammering. She'd gotten good at moving quietly these past days, learned which floorboards creaked and which stones were solid. The voices came from behind a section of shelves near the back wall. Ravel crept closer, pressing herself against the books, and listened. Reports that she's making progress. A man's voice. Theron. Ravel would recognize that scarred growl anywhere. Marina says the girl spends every waking hour studying. She actually solved the Northern Treaty dispute. So she's not useless after all. Another voice, unfamiliar. That changes things. It changes nothing. Theron's words dripped contempt. Smart or stupid, she's still human, still breakable. And when the blood moon comes, she'll fail just like the last one did. Are you certain if she actually has seer blood? I don't care what blood she has. The ritual is designed to kill her. Footsteps pacing. Ravencrest thinks he's so clever finding his precious seer. but he's played right into our hands. In 3 days, she'll attempt the ritual. She'll die. And when she does, Ravencrest will be broken. Vulnerable. That's when we strike. Ravel's blood turned to ice. And Marina, the unknown voice asked. She's still reporting regularly. Daily, she tells us everything what the girl eats when she sleeps, how she's progressing with her abilities. The girl trusts her completely. Thinks Marina is her ally. Theron laughed, a sound like gravel grinding. Fools, both of them. When the time comes, Marina will lead her exactly where we need her. And if Ravencrest discovers the betrayal, he won't. He's too distracted by his precious seer, too desperate to break the curse. By the time he realizes Marina has been ours all along, it will be too late. Ravel pressed her hand against her mouth, fighting down nausea. Marina. Sweet, kind Marina, who'd brought her tea and helped with her hair and seemed genuinely concerned for her well-being. Marina was a spy, a traitor. 3 days, Theron said. That's all we need to wait. Then Castle Ravencrest falls, and I finally claim what should have been mine 800 years ago. The voices faded as the conspirators moved away. Ravel stayed frozen against the shelves, her mind racing. She should tell Dorian, right now. Wake him up and tell him everything. But something held her back. A small voice of doubt. What if Dorian already knew? What if this was all part of some larger game she didn't understand? No, she'd seen the vulnerability in his eyes, the genuine hope. Whatever else he might be, Dorian believed in her. Trusted her, but Marina? Ravel needed proof. Real proof before she made accusations. She crept back to her room, her thoughts churning. 3 days until the blood moon. 3 days until Theron expected her to fail and die. 3 days to figure out who to trust. Morning came cold and gray. Ravel had barely slept, her mind replaying the overheard conversation on an endless loop. Marina arrived with breakfast as usual, her smile warm and genuine. You look exhausted, Marina said, setting down the tray. Did you sleep at all? A little. Ravel watched her carefully, looking for signs of deception. I had a lot on my mind. I can imagine, only 3 days left. Marina poured tea with steady hands. Are you getting close to understanding the prophecy? Maybe. I'm not sure yet. Every word felt like a test. It's complicated. Of course it is. Marina handed her the cup. If you need anything at all, please tell me. I want to help. The words sounded sincere. The expression on Marina's face looked genuinely concerned. But Ravel had heard what she'd heard. Marina was reporting to Theron, telling him everything. Actually, Ravel said slowly, there is something you could help with. I need to see Dorian, privately. Can you arrange that? Of course, I'll send word immediately. Marina started toward the door, then paused. Ravel, whatever you're struggling with, you're not alone in this. Remember that. After she left, Ravel stared at her tea for a long moment before pouring it down the drain. She wouldn't eat or drink anything Marina brought her anymore. Not until she knew the truth. Dorian came within the hour, concern written across his face. Marina said you needed to see me urgently. What's wrong? Ravel gestured him inside and shut the door. Then, keeping her voice low, she told him everything. The overheard conversation. Theron's plan, Marina's supposed betrayal. Dorian's expression didn't change as she spoke. No shock, no anger, just careful listening. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. I know, he said finally. Ravel's heart stopped. You know, I've known for 3 months that Theron was plotting against me, and I've known for 2 months that he was trying to recruit Marina. Dorian moved to the window, looking out at the snow-covered mountains. What I didn't tell you, what I couldn't tell you, is that Marina came to me the moment he approached her. She's been my agent, Ravel, feeding Theron false information while gathering intelligence for me. The words took a moment to process. She's working for you. She's a double agent. The tears, you've probably seen the concern, that's real. She hates lying to you, hates that you might think she's betrayed us. But it was necessary. He turned to face her. Theron needed to believe he had an inside source, and we needed to know exactly what he was planning. Ravel sank into a chair, her mind reeling. So everything I heard, was partially true. Theron does plan to strike when you attempt the ritual. He does believe you'll fail. But Marina isn't his spy. She's mine. Dorian crouched in front of her, his eyes intense. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you sooner. But if Theron suspected Marina was actually loyal to me, she'd be in danger. You'd be in danger. What about the unknown voice, the other person with Theron? That I don't know. Marina couldn't see who it was in the darkness. His jaw tightened. But we'll find out. Before the blood moon, we'll know exactly who's working against us. Ravel's head spun. Marina was loyal, the betrayal was fake. But there was still a conspiracy, still someone else in the castle feeding information to Theron. Who can we trust? She asked quietly. Each other. Dorian's hand covered hers. Beyond that, I'm not sure anymore. They sat in silence, the weight of conspiracy pressing down around them. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and relentless. 3 days left. 3 days to unravel a prophecy and unmask a traitor. 3 days before everything changed. That evening, Vivian invited Ravel to her chambers for dinner. I thought you might want a break from the library, Vivian had said, and perhaps some company that isn't quite so intense. Ravel had accepted gratefully. After the revelation about Marina, she needed normalcy, or at least the vampire equivalent of it. Vivian's rooms were beautiful, all rich fabrics and warm candlelight with windows overlooking the western mountains. A table had been set with food that actually looked appetizing, unlike the increasingly elaborate meals Marina had been bringing. I hope you don't mind, Vivian said, pouring wine into crystal glasses. I asked the kitchen to make human food. Real human food, not the fancy stuff they think you want. The meal was simple. Roasted chicken, vegetables, fresh bread, the kind of food Ravel would have made for herself back in Portland. Her throat tightened with unexpected homesickness. Thank you, she said quietly. This is perfect. They ate in comfortable silence for a while. Then Vivian spoke. I heard you helped solve the Northern Treaty dispute. That's impressive. Dorian told you word travels fast in the castle, especially when it's good news. Vivian smiled. You're making quite the impression. Even Seraphine admitted grudgingly that you might be more capable than she initially thought. High praise from someone who called me quaint. Seraphine judges everyone harshly. Don't take it personally. Vivian refilled their wine glasses. But I am curious, how did you find that clause, the one everyone else missed? I touched the treaty, saw the man who wrote it, understood his intent. Ravel took a sip of wine. It was good, much better than anything she could afford back home. The seer ability lets me read history directly. No translation errors, no misinterpretations. Remarkable. Vivian leaned forward, her brown eyes warm with genuine interest. And you only discovered this ability a few days ago. You must be a natural. Something in the tone made Ravel pause. Too interested, too focused. She thought about the overheard conversation, the unknown voice with Theron. No, surely not Vivian. She'd been nothing but kind, nothing but supportive. But doubt once planted was hard to uproot. It's getting easier, Ravel said carefully, though I'm still learning the limits. Limits? Vivian's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. What kind of limits? Oh, you know, how far back I can see, how much detail I can capture. Ravel set down her wine glass and picked up her napkin, a beautiful thing embroidered with silver thread. For instance, this napkin. I can see the woman who embroidered it about 2 years ago, but I can't see who taught her to sew or where the thread came from. The connections fade after a certain point. It was a lie. Ravel could see all of those things if she focused, but something made her hold back the truth. Fascinating. Vivian's expression was hard to read. And objects that people have touched recently, can you see them too? Sometimes, if the touch was meaningful enough. Ravel let her fingers brush the napkin again, this time genuinely reading it. She saw the embroiderer, yes, but also her breath caught. Also the person who'd selected this napkin specifically for tonight's dinner. Who'd told the servant which ones to bring to Vivian's chambers. Who'd touched it with deliberate intent. Vivian herself. And in that touch memory, Ravel saw something else. A meeting, Vivian and Theron, 3 days ago in a darkened corridor. Everything all right? Vivian's voice was concerned. You look pale. Fine, just tired. Ravel set the napkin down carefully, her heart racing. Actually, I should probably get back to my research. Only 3 days left, and I still have so much to figure out. Of course, but Vivian's smile had gone cold. Though before you go, I am curious about one thing. What's that? That bracelet I showed you the other day. The one with the sapphires. Did you ever try reading it? I know you were interested. Ravel's blood turned to ice. She'd never mentioned any bracelet to Vivian. The woman had never shown her any jewelry. Unless it was a test. Vivian was testing whether Ravel had used her ability on Vivian's possessions. Which meant Vivian knew about the seer power. Knew it could reveal secrets. Was afraid of what Ravel might see. I must have been thinking of someone else's bracelet, Ravel said, smoothly standing. Thank you for dinner. It was lovely. She made it to the door before Vivian spoke again. Ravel, the warmth was gone from her voice now. A word of advice. Be careful what you touch in this castle. Some objects carry secrets that are dangerous to know. Their eyes met, and in that moment Ravel saw the truth. Vivian wasn't her ally. Vivian was the unknown voice from the library, the second conspirator. The friend had been the enemy all along. I'll keep that in mind, Ravel said, and fled. She found Dorian in his study poring over maps by candlelight. Vivian, Ravel said without preamble. She's working with Theron. Dorian's head snapped up. What? Ravel told him everything. The dinner, the napkin, the test about the bracelet that didn't exist. She was trying to figure out how much I could see, how much of a threat I am to their plans. Ravel paced the study adrenaline, making her hands shake. And she slipped up, revealed she knew more than she should about my abilities. Dorian stood slowly, his expression darkening. Are you certain? Touch this. She pulled the napkin from her pocket. She'd grabbed it on the way out. See for yourself. His fingers brushed the fabric. For a moment, nothing. Then his eyes went distant, seeing what Ravel had seen. The meeting, Vivian and Theron, the conspiracy. She played us, he said quietly. Played you. Befriended you, gained your trust, all while reporting back to Theron. She wanted to know my limits. Wanted to understand exactly what I'm capable of before the ritual. Ravel's voice was bitter. I actually thought she was my friend. I'm sorry. Dorian's hand found hers. I should have vetted everyone more carefully. Should have protected you better. It's not your fault. Though part of her wondered how many others in the castle were hiding their true allegiances. How deep did the conspiracy run? What do we do now? She asked. We use it. Dorian's eyes gleamed with strategic thinking. Vivian doesn't know that we know. We can feed her false information through you. Make Theron believe his plan is working. While we prepare for the real battle. Exactly. He squeezed her hand. But Ravel, you need to be careful. If Vivian suspects you've seen through her, I know. She met his eyes. Only 3 days left. We just need to keep up the act until then. 3 days. It seemed like forever and no time at all. The next morning, Ravel went back to the library with renewed purpose. She'd spent 6 days studying the prophecy from every angle. Now it was time to understand what willing sacrifice really meant. The ancient texts spoke of sacrifice in many forms. Blood sacrifice, life sacrifice, the sacrifice of one's humanity. But there was another type buried in older sources, choice sacrifice, the sacrifice of choosing one path over all others. Ravel read until her eyes burned, following that thread through centuries of seer history, and slowly, carefully, a new interpretation emerged. What if sacrifice her mortal life didn't mean dying? What if it meant choosing to give up mortality, choosing immortality, not as a curse but as a conscious decision? The previous seer had refused because she'd been afraid. She hadn't wanted to become a vampire, so she tried to run. But what if Ravel didn't run? What if she walked into the ritual and chose transformation instead of death? Would that break the curse? Or was she grasping at straws, desperate for a third path that didn't exist? Dorian found her that evening, surrounded by books and handwritten notes. You look like you've discovered something. Maybe. She gestured to her research. What if we've been reading the prophecy wrong all along? What if sacrifice doesn't mean what we think it means? She explained her theory, watched his expression shift from skepticism to hope. It's possible, he said slowly. The language is ambiguous enough. But Ravel, we don't know for certain. If you're wrong about, then I die. Same as if I do nothing. She met his eyes. But if I'm right, if choosing to become a vampire willingly is what breaks the curse, then maybe we both survive this. You'd be giving up your humanity. I'd be choosing to save lives, including my own. She stood, moving closer to him. Isn't that what the seers always did? Made choices others couldn't? Dorian looked at her for a long moment. Then he pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was something precious and breakable. You're the bravest person I've ever known, he whispered into her hair. I'm terrified. I know, so am I. He pulled back enough to look at her face. But whatever happens on the blood moon, whatever choice you make, I want you to know that finding you, knowing you, even for just these 8 days, it's been worth every moment of the 8 centuries I waited. Something broke open in Ravel's chest, something that had been locked tight since her mother died, since she'd learned that caring for people meant losing them. Dorian. He kissed her, gentle at first, then deeper as she responded, her hands fisting in his shirt. His lips were cool but not cold, and the way he held her like she mattered, like she was worth cherishing, made her want to cry. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dorian pressed his forehead to hers. 2 more days, he said. 2 more days, and then we find out if prophecies can be rewritten. Together, Ravel whispered. Together. Outside, the moon rose over Castle Ravencrest. Not full yet, not the blood moon, but close. So close. Day 7 dawned cold and silent. Ravel woke before sunrise, her body tense with the knowledge that tomorrow night would change everything. The blood moon, the ritual, the moment when she'd discover whether her reinterpretation of the prophecy would save her or kill her. She dressed in the dark, choosing practical clothes pants, a warm sweater, boots that could run if needed. Then she made her way to the library, seeking comfort in the one place that had felt safe since arriving at Castle Ravencrest. Dorian was already there, standing by the window watching the pre-dawn darkness. Couldn't sleep either, she asked. He turned, and in the candlelight she could see the weight of 8 centuries in his eyes. I keep thinking about all the ways this could go wrong. So do I. Ravel moved to stand beside him. But we don't have a choice anymore. Tomorrow night, Theron will make his move regardless. Better to face it prepared than to run and be caught unprepared. When did you become so brave? I'm not brave. I'm just tired of being afraid. She looked out at the mountains barely visible in the gray light. My whole life I've played it safe, kept my head down, made myself small so I wouldn't be noticed. And where did it get me? A studio apartment I could barely afford and a job where I was invisible. You're not invisible here. No, here I'm terrifying and valuable and maybe about to die. She laughed, but it came out shaky. Though I suppose that's better than being ignored. Dorian's hand found hers. His skin was cool as always, but his grip was solid. Real. You won't die, I won't allow it. You can't control fate. Then I'll fight it. His voice was fierce. I've had 800 years to learn how to fight impossible odds. If the prophecy demands your death, I'll find a way to rewrite destiny itself. The words should have sounded like bravado. Instead, they sounded like a promise. Marina appeared in the doorway, her expression grave. My lord, my lady, Lord Theron has requested an audience. He says it's urgent. Ravel and Dorian exchanged glances. This wasn't part of Theron's usual pattern. He avoided direct confrontation with Dorian, preferring to scheme in shadows. Where? Dorian asked. The Great Hall. He's brought representatives from the eastern houses, 20 of them. 20 vampires, all loyal to Theron, all potential threats. It's a show of force, Ravel said quietly. He wants you to see his support. Let him show it. Dorian's expression hardened. We'll meet him in the hall, but Ravel stays with me. I want her visible, protected. They walked to the Great Hall together, Marina trailing behind. With each step, Ravel felt the weight of what was coming, pressed down harder. Tomorrow night, everything would change. But today she had to survive Theron's power play. The hall was full of vampires when they arrived. Not just Theron's 20, but others too. Lady Seraphine and her faction, various lords and ladies Ravel had seen at court, and there near the back Vivian. Their eyes met across the room, and Vivian's expression was carefully neutral. The friend who was really an enemy, wearing the mask of concern. Theron stood at the center of the hall, radiating confidence. The scars on his face looked even more brutal in the morning light filtering through the tall windows. Lord Ravencrest. He inclined his head in a parody of respect. Thank you for agreeing to meet. You said it was urgent. Dorian's voice was ice. State your business. My business is simple. I'm here to save your life. Theron gestured to the assembled vampires. We've all been discussing the situation. The seer, the ritual, the curse, and we've reached a consensus. Have you? The ritual is too dangerous, too many unknowns. We propose an alternative. Theron smiled, showing those 2 sharp teeth. Send the girl home. Find another way to break the curse. One that doesn't risk destabilizing the entire vampire world. Ravel felt anger flare in her chest. They were talking about her like she wasn't standing right there. Like she was a problem to be managed, not a person with agency. The seer bloodline is rare, Dorian said carefully. It could be centuries before we find another. Are you prepared to wait? We've waited 800 years. We can wait longer. Theron's eyes flicked to Ravel, cold and dismissive. Besides, this one is too weak, too human. She'll fail the ritual and die just like the prophecy predicts. Better to send her away now than to watch her break under pressure. I'm standing right here, Ravel said. Her voice cut through the hall like a blade. If you're going to discuss my weakness, at least have the courage to say it to my face. Silence fell. Several vampires looked shocked that she'd spoken at all. Theron's smile widened. Very well. You're weak, little seer. You've spent a week reading books and playing scholar, but that won't prepare you for what the ritual demands. You'll stand in that circle tomorrow night, and you'll realize you're not brave enough to sacrifice yourself. You'll hesitate, and that hesitation will kill you. You seem very certain about how I'll react. I've seen it before. Humans always break when faced with real power. He moved closer, towering over her. You can pretend to be strong all you want, but we both know the truth. You're nothing, just a frightened girl who got in over her head. Ravel met his eyes and smiled. You're right about one thing, I am frightened. I'd be stupid not to be. She raised her voice so everyone in the hall could hear. But being afraid doesn't make me weak. It makes me human. And my humanity is exactly what this ritual needs. Your humanity will get you killed. Maybe, or maybe it will save all of you. She looked around the hall, meeting the eyes of the assembled vampires. You've all forgotten what it means to be afraid, to hope, to choose. You're so used to immortality that you've lost touch with what it means to truly live. That's the real curse, isn't it? Not the bloodlust or the darkness, the emptiness. Lady Seraphine stood slowly, her silver hair catching the light. The child makes a fair point. Theron whirled on her. You can't be serious. I'm old enough to remember what we were before the curse. Seraphine's voice was thoughtful. We felt things then. Joy, sorrow, real connection. Now we just exist. If she can restore that even at great risk, isn't it worth attempting? It's worth her death. Theron's voice dripped scorn. It's worth my choice, Ravel corrected, and I choose to try. The hall erupted in murmurs. Vampires arguing, debating, some supporting Ravel's decision, others calling it suicide. Dorian raised his hand and silence fell immediately. The decision is made. Tomorrow night at the Blood Moon's peak, we attempt the ritual. Those who wish to witness may do so. Those who object are free to leave Castle Ravencrest. Theron's jaw clenched. You're making a mistake. Then it's mine to make. For a long moment, the two men stared at each other. Ravel could feel the weight of centuries-old conflict between them, something deeper than just this moment. Finally, Theron bowed stiffly. As you wish, my lord. I'll be watching tomorrow night, and when she fails, I'll be there to help pick up the pieces. He strode out, his 20 followers trailing behind him. But Ravel noticed something. Vivian didn't leave with them. She stayed, her expression concerned, playing her role perfectly. After the hall cleared, Seraphine approached. Up close, she was even more beautiful and more intimidating. I meant what I said, she told Ravel. I remember what we lost when the curse took hold. If you can restore it, you have my support. Even though you called me quaint, Seraphine's lips quirked. I've lived 500 years. Everyone seems quaint at first, but you? She studied Ravel carefully. You have steel in your spine. Good, you'll need it. After she left, Dorian pulled Ravel aside. That was either very brave or very foolish. Probably both. Ravel's hands were shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. But I couldn't let him talk about me like I wasn't there, like I didn't matter. You matter. He cupped her face in his cool hands. More than you know. They stood like that for a moment, foreheads pressed together, stealing comfort before the storm. Tomorrow night would bring answers. Tomorrow night would bring truth. Tomorrow night would bring blood. The final day passed in a blur. Ravel spent the morning in the library, reading and rereading the prophecy until she'd memorized every word in 3 different languages. She traced the portrait of Seraphina with gentle fingers, wondering what the last seer would think of her descendants' plan. Choose to live, Ravel thought at the painted face. Choose transformation over death. That's what I'm going to do, if it worked. Marina brought lunch, simple food, warm and nourishing. Eat, she urged. You'll need your strength tonight. Marina Betum, Ravel said suddenly. Thank you for everything, for being on our side even when it was dangerous. The housekeeper's eyes filled with tears. I wish I could have told you sooner. Hated watching you doubt me. I understand why you couldn't. Ravel squeezed her hand. You were protecting all of us. After Marina left, Vivian appeared. Perfect timing as always. The spy who thought she was still hidden. I wanted to check on you, Vivian said, her voice warm with false concern. Tonight must be terrifying. It is. Ravel played her part. I keep thinking about what Theron said. What if I'm not strong enough? You are. Vivian sat beside her, taking her hand. I know you are. And no matter what happens, you're not alone. I'll be there tonight, supporting you. The lie was so smooth, so believable. If Ravel hadn't known the truth, she would have been comforted. Thank you, she said. That means a lot. After Vivian left, no doubt to report this conversation to Theron, Ravel sat in the empty library and let herself feel the weight of what was coming. Tonight she would walk into a ritual designed to kill her. Tonight she would bet her life on a reinterpretation of an ancient prophecy. Tonight she would discover if choosing immortality willingly could break an 800-year curse. The sun set slowly, painting the mountains gold and red. Ravel watched from her window, trying to memorize this moment, her last sunset as a fully human woman. Tomorrow she'd be something else, or she'd be dead. The ritual site was a circle of standing stones half a mile from the castle, nestled in a valley where three streams met. Ancient, powerful, the kind of place that felt wrong even before you knew what it was for. Ravel walked there as the blood moon rose, flanked by Dorian on one side and Marina on the other. Behind them came the witnesses, vampires who'd chosen to attend, drawn by curiosity or hope, or the desire to see her fail. She could feel Theron's eyes on her back, could sense Vivian walking somewhere in the crowd, pretending to pray for Ravel's success while hoping for her death. The stones were massive, twice her height, arranged in a perfect circle. In the center, someone had placed a stone altar worn smooth by centuries of use. Moonlight painted everything silver and shadow. "This is where the curse was first cast," Dorian said quietly, "where my ancestor made his bargain with darkness. It seems fitting to break it here." Ravel looked at the altar and felt her courage waver. So many unknowns, so many ways this could go wrong. "I'm scared," she whispered. "So am I." His hand found hers. "But we're in this together. Whatever happens." The assembled vampires formed a loose ring around the stones, their faces pale in the moonlight. Ravel spotted Seraphine near the front, her expression unreadable. Theron stood opposite, his scarred face twisted with anticipation. And there Vivian near the back, positioned suspiciously close to the forest edge. An escape route, or an attack position. Dorian led Ravel to the center of the circle. The altar was cold under her palms, the stone carrying memories of violence and dark magic. She touched it deliberately, letting the visions come. Blood, so much blood, screaming, the curse taking hold, humanity draining from 100 vampires at once as the bargain came due. She pulled back, gasping. "I'm going to need a knife," she said. Dorian handed her an ancient blade, its edge still sharp despite centuries of age. "Are you ready?" "No, but let's do it anyway." He stepped back, giving her space but staying close enough to intervene if needed. Ravel raised her voice so all the witnesses could hear. "The prophecy speaks of willing sacrifice, of a mortal seer binding her life to the vampire kings. For 800 years you've interpreted that as death, as destruction." She met Dorian's eyes across the altar. "But what if it means something else? What if sacrifice means choosing to give up mortality, choosing transformation over death?" Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Theron's voice cut through them. "You're grasping at straws, girl. The prophecy is clear. Sacrifice means death. Then I guess we'll find out who's right." Ravel placed her palm flat on the altar and drew the knife across it. Pain flared bright and sharp. Blood welled up dark against her pale skin and dripped onto the ancient stone. The moment her blood touched the altar, the world shifted. Power surged through the standing stones, ancient and hungry. The blood moon overhead seemed to pulse its light, turning crimson. Ravel felt the curse reaching for her, trying to understand what she offered. "I choose," she said, her voice steady despite the fear. "I choose to bind my life to Dorian Ravencrest. I choose to sacrifice my mortality, not my life. I choose transformation." Dorian stepped forward, drawing his own blade across his palm. Their blood mingled on the altar, mortal and immortal, mixing in ways that defied nature. The power exploded. Light erupted from the stones, not the red of the blood moon, but gold, pure and blinding. It washed over Ravel like a wave, and she felt herself changing. Not dying, transforming. Her human heartbeat slowed. Her body cooled. But unlike the cold death of vampirism she'd read about, this felt like completion. Like two halves of a whole finally joining. The curse recognized her choice. Recognized that she'd offered something it had never been given before. Willing transformation, conscious sacrifice of humanity in exchange for the power to break its hold. And the curse shattered. The golden light spread from the altar in concentric waves, washing over every vampire in the circle. Ravel watched through vision that was suddenly sharper, clearer than human sight. As centuries of curse broke apart like glass, vampires gasped. Some fell to their knees. Others pressed hands to their chests as if feeling their hearts beat for the first time in ages. Because they were. Ravel could hear it, the sudden rhythm of hearts restarting, blood pumping with new warmth. Not fully human, but no longer dead either. Something in between. Something transformed. Daywalkers. That's what Dorian had called them in his most hopeful theories. Vampires who'd regained their humanity without losing their strength. The light faded slowly, leaving everyone blinking in the crimson moonlight. Ravel looked at her hands, still pale but not corpse pale. She could feel her heart beating slower than before, but steady. When she breathed, the air tasted different, richer, more complex. It worked, Dorian whispered. He stared at his own hands in wonder. Ravel, it actually worked. Before she could respond, chaos erupted. Theron's voice rang out furious and desperate. No, this isn't over. Ravel turned to see him drawing a sword, ancient steel that gleamed with dark enchantment. His face was twisted with rage as he charged toward the altar toward her. But he'd miscalculated. The curse breaking had restored emotions to all the vampires, including his own followers. And with emotions came clarity about whose side they were really on. 3 of Theron's 20 stepped in front of him, blocking his path. Stand aside, he snarled. No, my lord. The speaker was young, barely past human teenager years when he'd been turned. Not this time. She saved us. She gave us back what we lost. We won't let you kill her. Theron backhanded him aside with supernatural strength, but the delay had given Dorian time to act. He moved faster than Ravel's new eyes could track, intercepting Theron before the sword could reach her. The 2 vampire lords clashed with the sound of thunder. Superhuman speed and strength, honed by centuries of combat. They were evenly matched, or they would have been if Dorian had been alone. But Lady Seraphine moved to his side, drawing her own blade. Enough, Theron, you've lost. I haven't lost anything. Theron's eyes were wild. This was supposed to be my moment. My chance to finally claim what Ravencrest stole from me 800 years ago. He stole nothing, Seraphine said coldly. You were passed over for the crown because you were cruel, because you valued power over wisdom. That hasn't changed. More vampires moved forward, surrounding Theron. His own followers, the ones who hadn't already abandoned him, looked uncertain. The curse breaking had changed them too, made them remember what loyalty and honor felt like. Theron saw his support crumbling and snarled in fury. If I can't rule, I'll destroy everything. He pulled something from his coat, a vial filled with swirling black liquid. Ravel recognized it instantly from her research. The same dark magic that had created the original curse. Concentrated. Deadly. 1 drop of this in the ritual circle and the curse comes back tenfold, Theron said. Everyone dies. Human, vampire, daywalker, doesn't matter. All of it ends. Theron, donut. Dorian's voice was steady, but Ravel could hear the fear beneath it. You'll kill yourself too. I don't care. If I can't have the throne, no one will. He raised the vial, ready to smash it against the altar. Ravel didn't think. She just moved. Her new daywalker speed carried her across the space in a heartbeat. She grabbed Theron's wrist, her seer ability activating automatically at the touch. Visions flooded her mind, not of objects this time, but of Theron himself, his history, his memories. 800 years of rage and resentment, all focused on a single moment when Dorian's ancestor had been chosen as king over him. But deeper than the rage, Ravel saw something else. Pain, loneliness, the same desperate need to matter that had driven her to apply for a fake job at a non-existent archive. You're not angry about the crown, she said, the revelation coming to her through the visions. You're angry because you've been alone for 8 centuries, because the curse took your ability to connect, to love, to be seen. Theron's eyes widened. Get out of my head. You wanted someone to see your pain, to acknowledge how much you've suffered. Ravel's grip on his wrist didn't waver. I see you, Theron. I see 800 years of isolation. But this, she gestured to the vial, this won't end your pain. It will just spread it to everyone else. For a moment, something in his expression cracked, something human and desperate and lost. Then it hardened again. Better we all suffer than I suffer alone. He tried to smash the vial, but in that moment of hesitation, Dorian had moved. His hand closed over Theron's crushing bone and glass together. The vial shattered. The dark liquid spilled directly onto Theron's skin. He screamed. The magic that had been meant to destroy the ritual circle turned on him, instead consuming the darkness in his own soul. His immortality drained away like water through a sieve, centuries of stolen time rushing out all at once. Ravel watched in horror as Theron aged, not gracefully, but rapidly. His hair turned gray, then white. His face collapsed with wrinkles. His strong body withered to something ancient and frail. In 30 seconds, he went from a warrior in his prime to an old man. Dorian caught him as he fell, lowering him gently to the ground. Why? Theron's voice was barely a whisper, the voice of someone at the very end. Why not just kill me? Because you were right about one thing, Dorian said quietly. You've suffered enough, now you can rest. Theron's eyes found Ravel. You saw me. Really saw me. I did. Thank you. He closed his eyes, for seeing what everyone else missed. He died there in the circle of stones under the blood moon, not with violence or rage, but with something like peace. Ravel stood slowly, her hands shaking. Is it over? Not quite. Dorian's voice was hard. There's still one traitor to deal with. He looked toward the edge of the circle, toward Vivian, who was trying to slip away into the forest. Seize her, Dorian commanded. 3 daywalkers moved with supernatural speed, catching Vivian before she could escape. She struggled, her mask of friendship finally dropping to reveal the calculation beneath. I can explain, she said quickly. Theron forced me to help him. He threatened, stop lying. Ravel moved closer, her new seer sight reading every micro-expression. I know you volunteered to spy. I saw it in your memories when I touched the napkin. Vivian's face went pale. You can see memories from objects I didn't know. That's why you tested me. Why you mentioned a bracelet that didn't exist. You wanted to know what I could see. Ravel felt a deep sadness beneath her anger. I actually thought we were friends. We could have been, if you'd chosen differently. Vivian's voice turned bitter. But you chose him, chose this life, chose to become what I've been trapped as for 300 years. I chose to save lives. You chose to end them. Dorian's voice was ice. Vivian Frost for the crime of treason, for conspiring with Theron Kane to murder Lady Ravel and overthrow this court, I sentence you to death. Vivian's eyes widened. Wait, please, I'll leave. I'll go far away and never return. No. Dorian's hand moved faster than sight, and Vivian's head separated from her body. It was over in a second, merciful despite everything. The body dissolved to ash the way ancient vampires did when truly killed. The curse might be broken, but some rules still held. Ravel looked away, feeling sick, despite knowing it had been necessary. Dorian was at her side immediately. Are you all right? I will be. She took a shaky breath. Is it really over now? One more thing. He raised his voice so all the assembled daywalkers could hear. We need to formalize what just happened. Ravel Ashcroft broke the curse. She saved us all, and according to ancient law, she's earned her place as Seer Queen. I second the motion, Seraphine said immediately. All in favor. A chorus of voices rose in agreement. Not everyone, but enough, the majority. Ravel stared at them, overwhelmed. I don't know how to be a queen. You already are one, Dorian said softly. You just needed the crown to match. 4 months later, Castle Ravencrest looked different in daylight. Actual daylight, not the muted gray that had filtered through clouds for centuries, but real golden sunshine that painted the stones warm and turned the snow-covered mountains into something beautiful instead of forbidding. Daywalkers could walk in sun now. Not for long periods, they still needed protection, but enough to see the world as it was meant to be seen. Ravel stood in the castle's newly renovated library, arranging books on shelves that had been expanded to accommodate the collection she was building. Not just vampire texts now, but human books too. History, science, literature. She wanted this library to be a bridge between worlds. The world was changing. Castle Ravencrest had become a beacon for vampires seeking transformation, wanting to break their own curses and join the new Daywalker community. Ravel and Dorian were building something unprecedented, a society where supernatural and human could coexist, learn from each other, grow together. It wasn't perfect. There were still conflicts, still vampires who resented the changes. But progress was happening, and Ravel was at the center of it, using her seer abilities to mediate disputes, to read histories, and find solutions to bridge gaps that had existed for centuries. She'd gone from invisible to essential, from nobody to queen. My queen. Marina appeared in the doorway, a smile on her face. There's someone here to see you. Who? A visitor from your old life. Ravel's heart skipped. She followed Marina to the castle's entrance hall, where a woman stood looking around with wide eyes. Catherine Reeves, Ravel's former supervisor from the Portland Library. Ravel? Catherine's voice was uncertain. Is that really you? Hello, Catherine. Ravel moved forward, trying to see herself through Catherine's eyes. The same face, but different now. Paler, sharper, more confident. What brings you to Vermont? We heard about the rare book collection here. Heard they'd hired an archivist. When I saw your name, Catherine looked around the massive castle. What is this place and how did you end up here? It's a long story, Ravel smiled. The short version, the job posting was real. This is where I belong. Catherine studied her carefully. You look different, happy, more alive somehow. Ironic given that Ravel was technically undead, but also true. She'd never felt more alive than she did now. I am happy, she said simply, for the first time in a long time. They talked for a while, Catherine filling her in on library gossip, Ravel carefully editing her own story to leave out the supernatural bits. Finally, Catherine stood to leave. You know I owe you an apology, she said. I told you that you lacked instinct, that you were too careful. I was wrong. You just needed the right environment to shine. The words landed like vindication, sweet and satisfying. Thank you for saying that. After Catherine left, Dorian found Ravel standing by the window watching her former supervisor's car disappear down the mountain road. Everything all right? Better than all right. She turned to face him. She apologized, said I was right where I belonged. You are. He pulled her close and she melted into his embrace. Have I told you today that you're remarkable? Only twice, you're slacking. He laughed and the sound still amazed her. Dorian laughed now, felt everything the curse had stolen, and so did all the other daywalkers. There's something I want to show you, Dorian said, pulling her toward the door. He led her through the castle to a room she'd never seen before. When he opened the door, Ravel gasped. It was a workshop, not for weapons or armor, but for book restoration. Every tool she'd ever dreamed of having equipment that would cost a fortune all arranged in a space designed specifically for her work. I thought you might want somewhere to practice your craft, Dorian said. You're a queen now, yes, but you're also still Ravel Ashcroft, rare book restorer. I didn't want you to lose that part of yourself. Tears stung her eyes. This is perfect. So are you. He kissed her gently. My seer queen, my partner, my choice. That evening they held court in the great hall. Not the tense, hostile gathering Ravel remembered from her first night, but something warmer. Daywalkers laughing, talking, planning for a future that finally held hope. Seraphine approached, her silver hair shining in the candlelight. I have news from the Eastern houses. They've formally recognized your rule and requested permission to send delegates for transformation. Granted, Ravel said without hesitation. Everyone deserves a chance to choose. Look at you, Seraphine said with genuine warmth, making queenly decisions like you were born to it. I'm still learning. We all are. That's what makes this interesting. Seraphine raised her glass in salute. To the seer queen, may she reign long and wisely. The hall echoed with the toast. Ravel felt Dorian's hand in hers warm now, instead of cold, and looked out at the faces of people she'd saved. They'd called her ordinary, unremarkable, nothing special. They'd been wrong. She just needed the right circumstances to prove it. Last week, Ravel had made a trip back to Portland. The rare bookshop where she used to browse was still there, tucked between a coffee shop and a yoga studio. Mr. Chen, the sweet old man who loved books, had stared at her in amazement. My God, what happened to you, he'd said. You look different, powerful. I found where I belong, she'd told him, running her fingers over familiar spines. She'd thanked him for teaching her that books carry memories, that touching them can tell stories the words alone can't convey. He'd sold her a first edition she'd been eyeing for years, a price that would have been impossible 6 months ago. She'd handed him her credit card without blinking. Are you happy, Ravel? Really happy? He'd asked as he wrapped the book. I am. Good, you deserve it. You were always too good for this city, too special. Wherever you are now, I hope they see that. They do, she'd said, smiling with eyes that saw more than they ever had before. They really do. Now standing in her castle, Ravel thought about that moment, about how far she'd come from a train station in the middle of nowhere, shivering and desperate, to a castle in the mountains ruling alongside the man she loved. From ordinary to extraordinary, from invisible to impossible to ignore. Her phone buzzed, a text from the northern clans about a treaty negotiation next week. Another from a vampire lord in France requesting information about the transformation process. Her new life busy and purposeful and full. She typed quick responses, then set the phone aside. Dorian appeared in the doorway of the library. Ready for tonight's council meeting. Always. They walked together through the castle halls, past windows that now let in sunlight, past tapestries that told stories of 800 years of history. Past the life she'd left behind and toward the future she was building. Ravel Ashcroft, seer queen, breaker of curses, chosen one. They'd said she was worthless, just a nobody book restorer with no instincts and no future. They'd been wrong, and her story was just beginning.